So, welcome, Ty. Thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me as a guest. I'm excited.
I'm looking forward to our conversation. Where in the world are you tuning in from, Ty?
I'm tuning in from Toronto, Canada right now, right downtown, right in the thick of the action.
Amazing. That would be an extraordinary place to live. So, tell me a little bit about your story. What brings you on the podcast and how that story impacted you?
Yeah, so I grew up kind of the opposite of downtown Toronto, where I am now. I grew up on a farm near a little town in Saskatchewan. You may have heard of it, Christine. It's Watson. Have you heard of Watson by chance, Christine?
Yes, I have heard of Watson. Yeah. I
Oh,
think
how
our
have you heard of it?
farmyards, I think our farmyards were like 6 kilometers apart growing up.
Yeah, for anyone listening, Christine and I actually grew up very close, as in a couple miles away from each other, both on a farm.
Hmm.
So, nice little full circle moment here for us to have this conversation. So, I'm particularly
Absolutely.
excited. And Watson has only about 800 people. So, growing up on the farm, I was kind of a shy, little awkward kid. And I didn't particularly like speaking to people. I just wanted to climb trees. I wanted to roam through the bushes and break sticks. That was kind of my idea of fun. And I had an older sister. Her name was Lana. And she was the opposite of me. So very bubbly, outgoing, a lot more extroverted. So she would actually speak for me sometimes. And if somebody asked me a question when I was a kid, Alana would jump in and say, "Let me tell you what Ty thinks." So that's okay when you're a kid. But then as you get a little bit older, having someone speak for you doesn't quite work. So when I graduated university, the only job I could get was selling life insurance. Now imagine this, your whole income and all of your days spent trying to get people to talk about what's going to happen if you die young. Not the most comfortable conversation for a really shy, awkward kid. So I had some really tough struggles just trying to get comfortable, not only having those conversations, but I was awkward even asking somebody how their weekend was. So it got to a point where I remember I was sitting in a meeting one particular day and we were giving our updates around the room. And my boss at the time asked, "So, what do you think about this client that you're trying to pursue?" And to this day, I don't really remember what I said. I was so nervous, so sweaty, so anxious. And so I stumbled out some words and he said, "Yeah, but what do you think though?" And apparently I had just given some mumble jumble that no one could understand because it was just dead silent. I remember I was so embarrassed in that moment. And I went home that day and I Googled, can I still be successful without having to talk to anyone? Not many results came up. Basically, maybe if I was a tech genius, which I wasn't, could have got by, but was not that. So then I Googled how to speak so people actually effing understand you. So a couple things came up. Once I took out the effing and I just put how to speak better, a couple results. Then I just spent, I remember that whole night I stayed up just researching and trying to figure out, okay, is there a better way to speak so I actually make sense? And I found actually an article and it talked about speaking with structure. So basically, like, here's how to organize your ideas. So say what your point is, say the reason why you think it, and then say your point again. So then I spent like the whole next week preparing for that meeting after. And I tried this out and I said, here's my update. These are the reasons that I think this, and that's my update. And he said, okay, makes sense. Then he moved on. So in that moment, I thought, wow, there's actually ways that I could get better at this. And it was kind of like a light bulb moment because I had had so many dark times, like just feeling worthless, feeling like I was never going to be able to speak to people well. Like I was just meant to be alone, meant to be isolated, not going to be successful. And I remember having really low self-esteem and just thinking that, oh, well, that's the way I am. I'm kind of hopeless. So then
Mhm.
realizing that, it really taught me, okay, so if this is learnable, there's probably other things that are learnable. And from there, that really just showed me that I have a lot more control than I thought that I had. And th there are so many more things that are figure outable than I ever believed before. So that's really what set me on the path of learning all about communication. And then now, flash forward to today, I've coached hundreds of people on their speaking skills, and Alana no longer has to speak for me, which I'm very proud of.
That is such a powerful story, Ty. And I really love this in the final moments of your story, you said you felt very much like this was just who you were. There was nothing that you could do about it. And I think so many of us feel that way in different ways, right? For you, it was communication, for another person, it might be, self-worth, self-esteem, whether or not, they people feel joy around them, or if they, are polarized by you or whatever it is, you just kind of got this feeling like, this is where I'm stuck. And I love that with you, you were able to say, like, it started with a Google, and then you were like, oh my God, this works. And realize that, hey, everything's figure outable. Technical term, I'm sure. And truly, I would agree with that. Everything is figure outable, but I wouldn't have believed that until years later, either, right? And as time has passed, I've realized that absolutely, I wanted to help people, and I wanted to be in this sort of light, and I wanted to speak on stages or be a dolphin trainer, or all the things I wanted to be when I was little. But I thought, I'm just a small town girl. I can't do it. Right. And then here we are, right? I've got this successful podcast and speaking on stages and those sorts of things. And really, again, it was figure outable, but it took time to learn that.
Absolutely. So the dolphin training is still coming, right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm still on my way to becoming a dolphin trainer.
That's
Yeah.
still in the future. I'm looking forward to that part. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Maybe
It's new.
you'll figure out a way to bring the dolphins up on stage. It'll be a whole performance.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Absolutely.
you're absolutely right. Sometimes it does just take time to realize these sorts of things. And we have so much access to information now, and not only information, but also people that can help us. I'm sure you can relate in the small town. Not a lot of people are into personal growth.
Mhm.
Or maybe you're in a larger center if you're listening, but there's just your inner circle of friends. Maybe they're not that into self-improvement, or they're not trying to get better at certain things in their life the way that you want to. And we're very fortunate now just to have access to books and videos, but even more powerfully, like coaches, mentors, people that can share their wisdom with us.
Mhm.
And some of the most, I would say, quick progress I ever made in my life, whether it was improving communication or working on the business or writing a book, whatever it was, I always had somebody that had done that before, being like, here's what doesn't work, here's what works. And that's a lot of what I do now with people, is just let's save all the time and the hours and hours of Googling and practice and paying for all this stuff, and just really boil it down to what's going to work best for you. So if a person's worried about time, you can actually make the time a lot shorter than you think, which is really cool.
I agree. Access to information is huge now. So speaking of information, can you give us some of your favorite tips and tricks when it comes to communication? Or I always think about the book How to Make Friends and Influence People. I loved that book, and it really changed my life in the way that I speak with people. And I remember that it had so many tools. And so let us know some of your favorite tools off the cuff.
Absolutely. The How to Win Friends and Influence People book is kind of like the OG of
Yeah.
communication books. That's really like the first one, the classic that most people read. That was the first one that I read as well. And there's a quote in there that I still remember, and it says, the sweetest sound in any language to a person is the sound of their own name, Christine. So
Mm-hmm.
it reminded me to use names and remember names. That's one quote that I still remember to this day. But most popular in terms of little tips and tricks that I teach, actually, it was one of the first things that I learned, which was speaking with structure. So just to give something really tangible, I'd mentioned kind of a way of organizing thoughts and ideas a little bit earlier. So point, reason, point is a really easy one that people can use
Mm.
to explain something or answer questions. So let's say you asked me what my favorite movie was, just as an easy one. I could say my favorite movie is Fight Club. Start with that main point. It's my favorite movie because I love psychological thrillers. I like weirdly seeing people get beat up. And it's one of those movies where it's totally different watching it the second time versus the first time. So those are the reasons that I like it. And then I
Mhm.
restate my point so it's super clear. That's why Fight Club's my favorite movie. So we got point, then you can give some reasons depending on how much you have to talk about. This part could be a little bit longer. And then you restate your point. So point, reason, point. Now, if you want to speak for even longer and give some more detail, you can add in a little story or an example. So it becomes now PREP, which is point, reason, example, point. Example could be a story, could be something that happened to you. And then if we can think about how can we organize what we're saying just into little step-by-step frameworks, it's kind of like if you're driving in a car without a GPS and you're like, okay, I think I need to turn here. Okay, let me just drive down this road, and you're looking around and you kind of hope you end up where you're planning to go. That's how a lot of people speak now because there's no structure. Sometimes you end up there, sometimes maybe not so good, and you're rambling and you're like, I took way too many turns here. What do I do now? People are staring at me. So when we have some structure like this, it's kind of like we're driving with a GPS. Okay, we know we make this turn here, make this turn, then we end up where we want to go, and it's just nice and crisp. It's clear, it's short. So I would say those are some of the most tangible, most popular things that I teach is just little structures like that for speaking.
Mm. And they're very powerful structures. I'm sure at first it's kind of two things are happening at once. You're like, okay, point, reason, point, and you're thinking, and it might stumble a bit. But after a period of time, this would become natural. It would become just something that you do without thinking.
100%. Yeah, everything is just kind of like building up the habits. And the cool thing about communication too is if I was trying to teach you the guitar, let's say,
Mhm.
you gotta sit down with that guitar outside of everything else that you're doing. But if you're trying to practice speaking, as long as you don't live in the woods as a hermit and you have no human interaction,
Mm.
chances are there's a lot of chances throughout your day, a lot of opportunities that you're actually going to get to practice this, right? So somebody asks how your day was. If you really wanted to practice, you could say, point, I had a productive day. What are the reasons you had a productive day? It's productive because I did an amazing podcast with Christine, I had multiple coaching sessions, and I went to the gym. So I had a really productive day today, right? And they might say, why are you talking like that? You usually just say good or fine, but you've
Yeah.
now practiced and now you're building the habits. You do that enough times, then you don't really even have to think about it. And these are really tools that you're just putting on your tool belt. You don't have to use them all the time, but they're there for when you want to be really clear and really concise.
Mhm. Excellent. So, Ty, I'm curious, how has the um, stark contrast affected you in your communication? Because you are the type of person that started off awkward and shy and all of those sorts of things. And then later, you're now a communication coach and you're making huge differences for other people. How does that impact you, knowing the stark difference and how you move through life now?
Good question. It helps me relate to a lot of my clients that are struggling too. And we don't really, well, I don't really want to learn fitness from somebody who's been in excellent shape their whole life. Or I
Mm.
don't really want to learn about finances from somebody who has millionaire parents. So I think there's an element of starting from that point really helps you serve others at a higher level because you know what it takes, you know which parts are hard, you know which parts need to be taught a certain way, which parts maybe take more time or less time. So I would say it's helped me be a better coach and serve people at a higher level, which is awesome. And it really, I would say, helps me appreciate what I have more now too. There's a cheesy little quote that I always think about, and there's it's how does it go? There's no light without dark. There's no joy without pain. You can't have a rainbow without a little rain.
Beautiful.
And so I think about that and I think, well, if I was always an awesome speaker or if everything was always amazing in these areas of my life, I wouldn't even know how incredible it is to have these skills or to now be able to connect with people when I speak with them or to show up confidently in situations where I used to be so nervous and so anxious. So the contrast, and a lot of your listeners can probably relate to this because they're going through different things as we all do. Sometimes having those dark moments really makes you appreciate the light when it does come.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Every interview, it's always the same answer. Going through this experience, although I didn't enjoy it, although it wasn't something I would prefer to do over, I still would because it brought me to this new, really wholehearted place where I feel really grateful for where I am now.
Yeah, sometimes I think, well, it would be nice if everything was just awesome from the beginning. That would have been pretty fun, pretty cool. But I always end up going back to, yeah, your ideas and your listeners' views on that too. It was all for the best. It
Hmm.
was all for the best. Sometimes we might want to change the past, but when you really think about it, yeah, everything has definitely served you, even the harder times.
Certainly. So I'm curious if someone was in your place right now and they're listening and they can't seem to find the success that they're looking for. They're feeling like their communication is maybe a little bit rough, and they're not connecting with people in a way that they mean to. What might be some advice that you'd give that person?
Certainly, I would make sure that they realized everything is a learnable trait. So this was actually a cool thing that I noticed is a lot of people want to be confident or they want to be charismatic or insert whatever word a person wants to be here. But even those you can acquire. So I'll give you an example. If we think about, let's say somebody wants to be charismatic, what does that actually mean, right? Charismatic, we can break it down to a set of behaviors and maybe a set of thoughts. So if a person walks in and they smile, they look you in the eyes, they shake their hand, they have a warm presence, they seem calm, maybe we'd say they're charismatic. They're maybe asking me questions or they're telling me a story in a way that makes me feel good. Okay, that person's charismatic. But all those little things are learnable. I can learn how to make eye contact with someone. I can learn how to smile. I can learn how to shake a hand. I can learn how to ask questions or tell a story. So I would say that all these things that you want to have are just little behaviors. So if we just slowly, step by step, add these little behaviors to what you want to be, you can truly be any type of person. And it's not just some wishy-washy, like, be anything you want to be. It's genuinely true that all of these things can be broken down step by step. So I'd make sure that they really understood that part first. And then it really is just going down to where are you most struggling now? So is it the confidence where you're just so nervous to talk to anyone? Or let's say you're maybe further along and you just don't feel like you're influencing people in these big meetings that you have. If you're not sure, then try writing out like, what do I struggle with most? Or recording yourself and watching yourself back. Not fun, but that'll also show you like where you're struggling most. And then just pick one thing. Pick one thing. If it's, I don't even like talking to people about their day, then let's practice just asking people about their day. Just
Hmm.
little things, right?
So
And
it, it
practice with,
sounds
yeah, go ahead.
it sounds to me like exposure therapy.
Well, it can be for sure. That's a part of it. I would also say, though, in addition to that, make sure you have a strategy. because if it was just about talking more, everybody would be a good speaker. So that's where, if you can get a coach, great. But if not, just make sure you're at least consuming some knowledge like YouTube videos, books, my Instagram videos, great place to start. Think of how you can approach things in a strategic way, not just doing them for the sake of doing them, right? So if
Mm,
I'm just going to go talk to random people, that's going to be likely terrible because you have no plan. But if you're saying, okay, I'm going to go
right.
ask them about how their day was and ask them what's been the best part of their day so far. Okay, at least now I have a goal, I have a plan, and then you slowly can build on that. But a lot of the people that I coach, they're not at the starting point of, oh my goodness, I'm so afraid to talk to people. It's more they're in kind of higher pressure situations sometimes. A lot of us can speak well to our friends or family, but it's important people, maybe it's people at work. That's kind of what makes us nervous.
Mhm.
And a lot of that comes down to they don't have the tools in their tool belt, so they don't know what to use. When they have to speak or they have to present, they're rolling the dice, hoping something good comes out, versus if they have things like point, reason, point, or they've prepared something, or they know what to do with their voice and their body language to look and sound more confident. Then that over time just becomes the habits, which then changes their identity, and then everything progresses from there.
Okay, so I have two things to say to that. The first one is I love your videos. I watch them all the time. So keep doing those, and I'm going to link your Instagram and everything to this podcast so that people can find you too. The second one that I was going to say is oh geez, now it's escaping me. But anyway, nevertheless, with with having a plan, I think that oh, I remember it. With having a plan, it's really, really important, I think, to remember that confidence, and I'll see if you agree with this, that confidence is not inherently something that you just have or don't have. It's something that's built. And would you agree that confidence is very closely tied to your ability to communicate?
Yeah, I agree with both of those. So the first was confidence isn't something you inherently have, it's built. I completely agree with that. Maybe 1% of people are born super confident, or they never had anything that happened in their childhood to take away from that natural confidence. But for you other 99% listening, yes, you can for sure build it. And I like to look at confidence a little bit both externally and internally. Personally, what I found works best for me and for my clients, we do a little bit of work on both. So external would be like, here are the actual skills. Like you're in a meeting and you have to give your point, you'd use like a point, reason, point, for example. Or if you're talking about a problem, here's another framework. You can start explaining what the problem is, then explain the importance of it, then explain potential solutions. Okay.
Mm,
So now let's say that's like a tool. So you're like, okay, I'm more confident because I at least know how to organize and explain what I have to say. So using that, you feel more confident because you have a tool to use. That becomes a habit, then a skill. So that builds your confidence. But then there's also the element of, do you believe that this will even work for you? Right?
mm,
If you have all the tools, but you still have all this doubt, that's just going to make the progress a lot slower. So then there's also the internal element of, how can I shift some of these beliefs? I'll give you an example of something that's worked well for me. I call these identity shifting questions. There's different names for them, like lofty questions. They're used to kind of shift the way that our subconscious thinks. So an example of this would be like, instead of an affirmation, I am a confident speaker, an identity shifting question would be, why am I such a confident speaker? So this has been proven to work better than an affirmation because an affirmation our brain can disagree with. Right? If I say I'm a confident speaker, my brain's like, I heard you speak earlier. You didn't feel confident at all. I don't believe you.
right.
Versus, why am I such a confident speaker? The way that our subconscious works, if we ask it a question, it has to go looking for an answer. So you can't really disagree with a question. You try to find an answer. So then it's been shown that if you ask the question enough times, so like once a day, for example, you ask that question once or twice a day in kind of a relaxed state, over time, your brain starts to go looking. And if there's nothing there, it'll actually help shift some of your beliefs and some of your actions so that there's an answer faster. So if I'm saying, why am I such a confident speaker? That kind of helps sort of like unlock or loosen up and shift some of those beliefs so that you start seeing, okay, well, I'm a confident speaker because, well, I'm learning these tools and, I actually felt a little bit better today in this meeting. I'm like, okay, this is starting to work. So if we've got the tools, the practical, like the frameworks, or make sure you have great posture so that you feel more confident and look more confident, right? Body language stuff, another external tool, plus some internal work like the identity shifting questions. That's where I've seen confidence being built the fastest.
Mm. Gold, legend. Love that. Because truly, I'm thinking about any other question that I've ever asked myself. Why is it safe for me to show up online and be seen? That is so much more powerful than I'm safe to show up online and be seen. I love that. I think you could transmute that tool to anything. Anything in life where you're feeling low or unsure or concerned. That's a good one. I'm gonna lock that away. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And for sure, it's not limited to communication at all. So a big one that I'll usually put in for a lot of the people I work with too, just to kind of help with this stuff in general, is why am I so good at praising myself and recognizing my progress? Or
Mm,
why do I talk to myself with love and compassion? Because a lot of people are so hard on themselves. So stuff like
mhm.
that too can help shift some of these things. I wouldn't limit it to really any topic now that I think about it. So don't have like 50 questions that take you an hour to go through, but have
Yeah,
like 10 or 15 of these just kind of focused around sort of the main things that you find challenging. And it's been shown to help quite a bit.
awesome. Very, very powerful. Okay. Well, I think that that is all my questions for today. Except for the final one, where can people find you and how can they connect with you?
Definitely. So Instagram and LinkedIn are the two that I use the most. So my username is just my name, Ty Hoesgen, just Tyhoesgen. And if it's all right with you, I'd like to give a free little gift away to your listeners as well.
Absolutely.
So this is a free course. It's called How to Speak Like a Confident Leader in 7 Days. And so all you have to do is go to howtospeakbetter.com and you can get it for free there. Howtospeakbetter.com.
Excellent. Well, I will be taking that and anyone else who is listening. So thanks, Ty, for everything and for showing up vulnerably and letting everyone know your story, and giving us the confidence to be better speakers, and also to have more confidence in ourselves.
Absolutely. Thank you again for having me as a guest. Your communication skills were great throughout this, by the way. Great questions, great listening. You added a lot of awesome thoughts to everything that I said too. So this was amazing. Really enjoyed this conversation.
Well, thank you.